Oilers Live Podcast.
Welcome to the Oilers Live Podcast. This is episode 23. I've got two of my favorite guests back again tonight. I've got the Oil Knight, Sean. You can find him at theoilknight.ca or on Twitter at The Oil Knight. That's KNIGHT. And we've got Kelly from Beer League Heroes. He's at beerleagueheroes.com or at Beer League Hero on Twitter. That's hero with an E at the end. Welcome, guys.
Hey, man.
Thanks for having us.
As if anybody follows me on Twitter, they will know this is our second go at this episode. The three of us had a wonderfully long chat a couple nights ago about the Oilers season, all of which will now be in the lost archives of the Oilers Live podcast. Maybe one day unearthed somewhere, and for our ancestors to listen to. Of course, I think it's gone into the ether. Tonight we'll chat about the Oilers season that was, what most of us, I think, feel was a failure, as our expectations were playoff hockey this year. I have the thought that we will each go discuss some of the negatives, some of the positives, and then talk about some of the priorities going into the new year. And then we'll, just have a bit of a show and chat, maybe chat a little bit about the playoffs this year and see where that goes. So, guys, why don't we start with Sean? Sean, if you could look back at the Oilers season and our lack of playoffs, what do you think? What do you think went wrong? Maybe three of the failures, three negatives. What went wrong with the Oilers season this year?
Well, the three things that kind of stand out for me the most, I think, kind of looking back. First off is the most important thing, I think, was coaching. I think it was a poor coaching effort overall. I think realistically, if you ask yourself, given the same roster, could a different coach, a different coaching staff achieved a better result with this roster? And if your answer is yes, I think so, well, then you kind of have your answer as far as what needs to be done moving forward. But the coaching from, and we've talked about this many times, not optimizing the lineup properly, moving guys around all over the lineup, no stability there at all. The handling of young guys like Slepyshev, who said he was frustrated, he wanted to be traded, and Puljujarvi publicly said he was frustrated. So many different things that kind of pointed at the coaching staff in particular really hurt the team as a whole and kind of affected the overall performance, I think. So that's kind of the first thing and the biggest thing that stands out for me. The second point, negative, huge negative, and it is tied into coaching, is the special teams. I mean, when you have Connor McDavid on your team, you should never be 31st on the power play. And they had
Here.
And they had the worst penalty kill in the history of the league for the longest time too, till it got a little bit better at the end. So, so that's, I mean, if you just, even if this team was average in penalty kill and power play, where would the team be, right? Like knocking on the door of a playoff spot for sure. So those two things in particular really hurt, and those were big negatives. And I guess the last thing would be just goaltending in general. I think Cam Talbot, and he'll be the first to admit it, had a subpar year. And I forget how many goals he let in on the first shot of the game. I lost track after 12. And if you count, first shot of the second period or whatever, it's probably 15 to 20. And that just can't happen. If you talk about having, great starts to games and that and building some momentum, as soon as you let in the first shot, boom, it's already a kick in the nuts, right? So just never had enough timely saves. But I will say, moving forward, I still have confidence in him, and I think he can rebound nicely. But looking back on the season, those would be the big three negatives for me.
Yeah, I think you won't find much disagreement here. Kelly, what's your thoughts on the season that was?
Well, I thought that the number one thing was the goaltending. I think that Talbot went into he went into the season hurt and thought he could play through it, and turned out that he couldn't. And in that first month, that's when when everything started to go downhill quite quickly, and kind of hurt the rest of the team by doing that. The defense was poor this year, and the special teams. Those are the top three for me. And then I guess you could go with some minor issues like the injuries. Didn't help anybody. Leon getting hurt early in the year definitely didn't hurt. I already talked about Talbot. Clefbaum having a bum shoulder for the whole year, and Connor being sick for an entire month. Adding to that, Sekera not coming back 100% in February. I think those are the three things that hurt the Oilers the most this year. So you could say coaching as well, but I think I'd like to focus on the players a little bit more so at this point.
Yeah. So we've had 2 goes at this episode, and both times you've done 5.
Yeah, toss them in there. There's minor ones that need to be discussed, not at length.
So, guys, we talked about this last time, and coaching, special teams, goaltending, defense. Kelly, you bring up injuries. What do you guys think? Like, how much of this year comes down to those injuries? If Connor didn't have the flu for the month, if Draisaitl didn't have this concussion and associated sort of concussion syndrome maybe after, or he played with a concussion, I think, for a number of games. If Sekera was in the lineup for right from the start of the season, does this season go considerably different, or do we still have the same coaching and goaltending problems?
I think it's pretty much the same.
Thoughts?
I mean, every team goes through injuries. Unless we lost McDavid for a considerable amount, I think it's pretty much the same result. I don't think the injuries really had much of an effect on the power play or the penalty kill. I mean, over an 82-game season, it still never really got any better. So, it seemed like the flu was running through the whole team there for a month or so, and that may have affected them to a certain extent. But I think realistically, it's probably I don't think it had that much of a factor or made a difference. What do you think, Kelly?
I think it has. I think given the players that were affected by the injuries, it had more of an effect. Like this past season reminds me of the Connor's rookie year, where guys were just getting dinged up all over the place. And don't forget, Nugent Hopkins got hurt a couple times this season too. So you take out a team's best players through injury, or you force them not to play at 100%, which in most players' cases is, their performance comes down, quite a bit, unless you're Connor McDavid, and then you're still a point per game player. But if I got a goalie that's not 100% and he's letting goals in left and right, well, that hurts the team, right? So if Talbot was 100% this year, do we think that he would have let in all those first shot goals? Or like the defense last year didn't change significantly to this year, except that Sekera was hurt, and for whatever reason, Clefbaum shoulder bugged him more this year than it did last year. So I think there are circumstances to which we can point at the injuries as a reason why the team suffered. This, like the special teams, is a mess anyhow. I put that on the coaches, and I'm sure we'll get around to that a little later because there's more specifics to go in with that.
Yeah, so I think you both have really valid points here. I mean, Sean, you're suggesting the coaching, like you can't, whether injuries or not, our power play this year, we still had a really good personnel and a incredibly shitty power play. So no doubt that does come down to coaching, and then of course, you're right, Kelly, on the injuries. I mean, you can't have a full if you don't have a full squad, you just won't be the same. You brought up this Talbot injury. Is it just from Stauffer that you heard that, or is that has that been circulating around? I hadn't heard that until we tried recording this episode before. Any idea what it was? Did he say?
I'd heard it before from guys that I talked to that work for the team, and so that was months ago though.
Yeah.
And then Stauffer at the end of the season said, "Well, I believe that he was working through something the entire season."
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I mean,
I was just going to say,
sorry,
I kind of have a philosophy here. We didn't mention this. We didn't talk about this last time, but I'm just curious what you guys think. And I kind of look back at the season and I went over some things, and I think it's real. But I think with Talbot, I think he really struggled mentally this year. And you go back to the playoffs last year when they grabbed his pad, Kessler grabbed his pad, and it was clearly not a goal. And clearly he listened to that all summer about the goalie interference. And I think it affected him mentally. And when he came out to start the season, I know he had a shutout the first game. He got yanked in the third game. He was clearly not happy when McLellan yanked him. And I felt like, and I don't have any proof to back it up, but I felt like a lot of times, especially on the power play where we were god awful and he was letting in so many goals on the power play, it felt like he kind of altered his game a bit. Like he was trying to create contact instead of fighting through the screen. He was kind of cheating, almost trying to draw that contact as he was trying to make the save. And I think it kind of got into his head. And then the Oilers lost like 15 straight reviews or something. And he's coming out and he's frustrated in the media, talking about how they never get any calls. And I think it was really, I think sometimes we kind of downplay the mental side of the game. And I think it really affected him in the playoffs previously. And then when it started in the year, he was kind of fighting through it all year. And maybe when Stauffer was talking about the injury, he wasn't necessarily referring to the injury. Maybe he was just talking about fighting through, mentally or whatever. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Did you see any of that at all, or?
I think I can see where his frustration is starting to come out, because he really puts value in playing the right way with honor and stuff like that. And he sees all the other goalies cheating to get a call, right? I like what you said makes a lot of sense too. And if we have a goalie that's mentally fragile, then we have a problem, right? You can't have your netminder being like that, or else they turn into
I don't want to say he's mentally fragile.
Right?
I was just saying that I think he kind of got off his game maybe a little bit, and he was trying too hard to draw a call or whatever. Maybe his fundamentals kind of adjusted a little bit as he's trying to draw contact. I don't know. It's just something that I know a few particular games, a few particular power plays. I kind of felt like he was, instead of squaring up to the shooter and fighting through, he was kind of leaning towards the guy in front, trying to draw that interference, and I think it affected his overall game.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, Sean, in how can a guy let in that many first shot goals if it's not a bit mental, right? I mean, he's not. You gotta be prepared. Come prepared. That's all. Mental toughness. I think you might be onto something. It's not something I really thought about, but he certainly he wasn't sharp right from the get-go. Almost every game, coming out after every period. And if you do kind of line it up with, his going off on the refs about not getting the calls, he had some emotional and mental moments right from the end of last year's playoffs. You're right. I think you're probably on, and off season might do him some good. And I'd also like to see. We talk about coaching. We so seldom talk about the goaltending or goaltender coaching. Schwartz, of course, is the goaltending coach. He's, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, doing work for both the Oil Kings and the Oilers. And, if you look at some of the best, like they got, I think Jonathan Quick, his coach, isn't Eddie Belfour in L.A.?
Is it
His
Ranford
coach?
Ranford.
Or Ranford, sorry. Yeah, Ranford. I mean, I would like to see, I'd like to see maybe try out a different goaltending coach. Maybe not throw Schwartz right by the wayside, but give him a bit of a reduced role. Have somebody, a real veteran NHL goaltender, come in and maybe coach him. And sometimes you can do that through having a veteran backup, right? Montoya may, I'm not certain we'll see Montoya back. Is there any word on Montoya, by the way? I mean, I don't think the expectation is to have him back. What's his contract? Is it? Is it
1 more year?
Oh, does he have another year? So I guess we would see him back. But yeah, I think you're onto something anyway on the mental piece. Yeah. So guys, we talked about the negatives, and I think that's most of what everybody focused on as the year went on. Of course, none of us mentioned Cirelli. I think we're kind of all in the same. I know this is an area that the three of us agree on. It's not really a popular opinion to keep Cirelli around. I mean, I'd say a good majority of fans put the blame squarely on him. I don't think the three of us are in that boat. But if Cirelli could have done anything differently this year, Sean, what do you think he might have been? He might have done what was a negative, maybe
for Cirelli in particular.
On Cirelli's performance for the year.
Well, I mean, he kind of admitted that he didn't find a suitable replacement for Sekera. I mean, he got OV2. I guess technically you would have liked to seen an upgrade maybe over OV2. Although I guess in hindsight you think about, well, if they did sign somebody like that, where would that guy play once Sekera did come back, right? But so I guess maybe that's a negative. He didn't find someone there. But the main thing for me would just be another scorer up front. A veteran guy. He has so many young guys, especially going into camp. Was it going to be Yamamoto? Is it going to be Slepyshev? Is it going to be Puljujarvi? Is it going to be Kajula? It would have been nice to get one more, and I'm sure he actively pursued it. But if you look back at the negatives, it probably would have been. I'd said, I wish he would have got one more veteran winger scorer.
Yeah, I tend to agree on that one. Kelly, your thoughts?
If Cirelli could do something different?
Yeah, just this year specifically. I mean, obviously there's a lot of people blame the year on him. I think we all, none of the three of us are really in that boat. But, there are a couple things he could have done differently. What might have they have been?
Well, I guess a couple things. Maybe he might not have traded Eberle. Or he might not have bought out Pouliot. If the penalty kill was so bad, maybe Pouliot had something to do with being part of the good of last year. But both those players, I think the coach didn't like. So
I think on the penalty kill though, when McClellan finally got around to changing up the personnel on the penalty kill.
Mm-hmm.
We noticed a remarkable difference, I think, and that was later in the year. I mean, he kept with the same guys.
Well, it was Letestu
throughout the whole season.
He stuck with Letestu on the power play, and he stuck with Letestu on the penalty kill. That was his leader. That was his go-to guy, and he was giving him the benefit of the doubt in the longest row possible for the longest time possible, and that's part of the reason why they suffered so long, I think.
Yeah, that's my thought. I mean, Kelly, sorry to cut you off on the Pouliot discussion.
That's okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, as soon as he took over from Johnson, when he said, "That's enough, Jimmy, your penalty kill, eat shit, I'm taking over." Personally, I seen a difference as soon as they started using Strome and Kara on the PK in a full-time role, and lessened like McDavid's minutes out there and lessened Draisaitl's and stuff like that. I think that's where I saw the huge difference in that. But in terms of other things, he might have done better. I think he's probably kicking himself in the pants for not getting a better backup earlier. But he like my theory is that he got all that cap room so that he could spend it at the deadline. He could go out and get a Rick Nash, or he could have went and traded for a Ryan McDonough, and it wouldn't have affected the cap so much.
Yeah.
And when it all started going downhill, then what? Is he supposed to like try and patch up the holes with the salary cap? Like as if he's back behind the 8 ball again, like he was in the summer he traded Hall. Like the GMs aren't going to do him any favors, right?
I think he took a gamble on that. I agree with you. I think he took a gamble on thinking the team would be better without Sekera than they were defensively, and they just weren't. I also think, you talk about backup goaltending. I think not many of us expected LB to be quite as awful as he was. I didn't. I don't know if you guys expected that, but he was in games last year or the previous season, and he wasn't awful. He was a capable backup. He wasn't. I wouldn't put him in the top backups in the league, but I expected better from him this season. Thoughts there?
Yeah, no. He his major thing with Brassard that I've seen is it's his glove hand. They all shoot high on his glove hand and beat him, right? And the coaching and NHL players, they're smart. Once they find something, they'll go there the whole time until you change it up. I'm not sure if Brassard had a lot of confidence in the NHL, so when he came up, I think he might be shaken before the game starts. But he had some good performances too last year. So, it's goaltending's fickle, man. It's one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up Dubnyk. Dubnyk's probably the best example, right? The guy that, I'm surprised he ever made it in the NHL, and now he's a top goaltender. So go figure.
Yeah, right. So it's could Dubnyk have done what he's doing in Minnesota, in Edmonton? Well, if he had Ryan Suter in front of him, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think so if we look back on the year, I mean, in terms of my thoughts on what Chiarelli could have done differently, I agree. I think you both have very good points. I would have, but if I think about putting myself in his shoes. So he could have done something with that extra money early on, but I think, as I said, I think he was taking a gamble on Sekera, not being as big a hole as it was. In that Clefbaum would be better than he was early on. That Benning would be better. That we'd have. Some capable defense. And then the big surprise, of course, was Nurse, but he just didn't. There wasn't enough. There wasn't enough of him and his game to kind of make up for the rest of it. What if we look back on the year, another sort of whipping boy is Chris Russell.
I think he was fine.
What do you guys think?
He had a good year, and I think he was leading the team in defense and points for the longest time. I know a lot of people don't like his game or whatever, but I don't have any issues. And there was the odd game where he scored on his own net or whatever, but whatever, that stuff happens. I mean, who cares? The guy's not going to go 82 games, go perfect, right? If you look at the entire body of work, I thought he had a good year, but what do you think, Kelly?
Yeah, no, I can argue that. I think he was fine, if not one of the better defensemen on the team. Two-way, right? He plays a specific way. He plays to his advantages. He's not a big defenseman, right? So he doesn't stand guys up at the blue line when they're coming into his own zone. He simply skates with them and keeps them to the outside, and he blocks as many shots as he can. So I think he's smart the way he plays. It's not always successful, but he's not. I don't know if he'll be a Hall of Famer or anything, but he's a very serviceable defenseman. And when you're going into playoffs, you want a guy like that on your team. And I think that's part of the reason why he was picked up by the Oilers, because they envisioned them going to the playoffs with defensemen just like him, and you know that he's gonna save a few games in the playoffs blocking shots.
So I think my feeling on Russell, there's a couple things. One is, sometimes a guy is painted unfairly because of the contract that he signed. And I think I can't blame a player for signing a maximum as much as they can get from a team. So if Chris Russell was able to get $7 million a year, he'd go for 7. We would all do the same. That doesn't make him less a player. It might make it less value for the dollar. So I think Chris Russell's a popular whipping boy for the contract that he signed. Oddly, I think the other reason is Kevin Quinn. This is sound a little bit silly, but every single game he brings up where Chris Russell is in terms of shot blocking in the league. And a fan base, they look at this and they hear he's, number 1 in shot blocks in the league, and then they think about the salary and they think that's what he's getting paid for. In my mind, Chris Russell's more than just a shot blocker. He's a capable defenseman. He might not be worth $4 million a year and a no movement or no trade clause. But I don't, as I said, I don't fault him for signing that contract. What I liked most about Chris Russell this year is other than, and I laughed about the scoring on his own net, I love when you don't hear about defensemen in games. So when they're not noticeable, right? Like, you'll have the noticeable defensemen like Doughty and Burns. They're more, and that's because they're offensive guys. But, those stay at home, or those guys that, should be out there and not causing plays that people notice. That's when I think they're doing their job. And there were a number of games where, other than Kevin Quinn suggesting or talking about the shot blocks, I didn't really notice Chris Russell in terms of I didn't notice him doing anything awful. So, in my mind, I think he had a half decent season.
Yeah, well, and that's a good thing, right? And I think he's a very underrated player. And you got to remember too, there were a lot of people that were ripping Chiarelli at the beginning of the year. Why would you sign Chris Russell to $4 million? Why wouldn't you trade for Travis Hamonic, whose salary is just under $4 million? And Calgary gave up a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and another second-round pick. And I think if you compare the two, Chris Russell had the better year. So I'm not too upset about his year this year.
Yeah, and the Islanders again, I guess, win on that one.
Yeah,
they love Alberta.
They sure do. What about guys? And we'll go for a break shortly after. How much of Lucic's off season as well, was a factor this year? In my mind, his not just his play, but the publicity around it, the mental part around it for the team. And he's a veteran guy. So, Kelly, I know you've talked about having veteran guys on the team. We forget Lucic is that guy, right? He's the guy that he's been there. He's been to the Cup. He's, should be a leader on the team. If you go back through the season and you watch games, how many times did we see him get back to the bench or get a penalty and he kind of looks skyward, and you felt for him? Well, or at least I did. And there's a lot of people I'm sure that don't, because they're, on the Lucic hater train. But how much of that had an effect on the season? Maybe Kelly, what's your thoughts?
Well, it's not even the season. So, like, people get it wrong when they say he had a bad year. He didn't. He had a bad half a year, right? He was right on par in the first 3 months of the year. He was one of, he was consistent. He was contributing, and he was playing the game he was playing, and what he's known to play. And then whatever happened at Christmas time, it shut right down. I don't know what happened at all. I don't think anyone can pin it down. But it turned into, like, like when you're watching the All-Star game and one guy's got 3 goals, or one guy's got 4 goals, and they want to get him that goal so he can break the record. Well, it ended up being like that, near the end of the year, when it was like his slump was hitting whatever 30 games or what it was, and it was putting him on and keeping him on with McDavid, because they knew McDavid would find a way to get him the puck. And you have to wonder if that affected the rest of the roster, meaning that, like, Cairo is playing quite well. Why couldn't have they thrown him up, up the lineup a little bit? Or why didn't they throw Puljujarvi up? Puljujarvi wasn't having a great year either. If the team's losing and, the GM and the coach are resigned to missing the playoffs, then why not give a kid like Puljujarvi, who needs the confidence, especially at this stage in his development, some time up with the better centerman. I'm not sure if Draisaitl loved playing with Leon. So it might, or Draisaitl loved playing with Milan, but it might affect the team in different ways, like that. But he's a vet too. He gets a little bit more rope from the coaches, and he's established. And I imagine he said to the coaches, like, "What are you doing? Like, you don't have to do this. You can give these other guys, more ice time as well." And I think it wasn't long after he broke that slump that McClellan decided to put him on the third line for the rest of the year. And to me, that line is nice. The Lucic, Strome, and Puljujarvi line, they performed quite well up until the end of the season.
Yeah, I was certainly happy to see them. I think if a guy's playing third line type of play, which I feel Lucic was near the end of the season, I think that's where you put him. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what kind of contract he has. But I mean, you could agree or disagree on that, I guess. Sean, your thoughts?
Well, the one thing I want to kind of just clear up, I know there's a lot of people that were kind of knocking Lucic for how slow he is, his foot speed and all that. But I mean, I thought, coming out of summer, I thought he was in great shape. I thought he's always going to be slow at accelerating. It's going to take a while to get him going because he's got a big upper body and he's got chicken legs, really. He doesn't have very big legs at all, so it's always going to take a while for him to get going. But once he gets going, and he's got good speed, and I thought he was skating well. The real thing with him, I guess, is like if you look at, he had 10 goals this year and 34 points. Last year he had 23 goals and 50 points. Well, if you look at the difference in power play points, it's last year he had 25 and this year he had 7. So I know he was in a huge slump. But how much of that do you point towards the power play? Like, if a guy's really struggling, it's nice to just get him out there, and just get him in front of the net and just get a power play goal, or and bank it off him or whatever, and that kind of gets him going, right? So, I think the futility of the power play really hurt him in particular because he really thrived there last year. So that was part of it, and then I mean the last part of the season was just a complete write-off. Like he just got worse. I felt so sorry for him. Like I love Lucic as a player and as a man. Like he's a great guy, great leadership, but his season couldn't end sooner. He was just absolutely awful. But again, moving forward, everybody's talking about buying him out or getting rid of him or whatever. You got to go with the trends and you got to bank on the player. I mean, if you just look in the last, and I've got the stats in front of me, you just look at the last 4 years, his shooting percentage is 15.7, 12.8, 16.1, and 13.1. And last year was 6.8. So what are the odds he's going to have a 6.8 shooting percentage again next year? It's probably very unlikely, right? So I'm still a big fan of the player. I think he has a lot to offer, and I think his greatest impact is his leadership and in the playoffs. Unfortunately, we didn't make it there this year. But the fact that everybody's kind of ripping him and, he's a bum, get him out of there or whatever. I agree with Kelly. You know what? Next year, if, fill a few holes in the roster, start him out on the third line so there's a lot less pressure. Don't even bother putting him with McDavid. It's just he can't keep up. It's just not – you're just hurting the player more than helping him. Start him on the third line, get him some confidence, and I think that shooting percentage goes up, and I think his season rebounds. So I'm very optimistic for next year, but I'm always a glass full kind of guy anyway. So,
we're going to go into break in what's probably going to be the most unpopular of all my podcasts, only because we didn't trash Chiarelli, we didn't trash Russell, and we didn't trash Lucic. And on that note, I'm going to break.
Oilers Live Podcast.
And welcome back to the Oilers Live Podcast. This is part 2 of the season in review, where we've got Sean from the Oil Night and Kelly from Beer League Heroes on. Thanks again, guys, for joining.
Thank you.
No worries.
This part here, we're going to maybe step away from talking about all of the negative aspects of the league or the season that was. I think that's, if you want to dwell on that, just join Oilers Twitter for a little while and you'll get your fair share of negativity. Now, let's chat about maybe some of the positives that came out of the season. We started with Sean last time. We'll start with Kelly this time. Kelly, maybe what kind of positives, maybe 3 positives that you took from this year?
I've got 17 positives for you.
I'm counting.
I'm going to change it up from the last time on our botched recording. One of the positives was JJ Carroll. I loved that he kind of found it upon himself to sort out his game after like having a poor start to the year. He really emerged as an excellent choice on the penalty kill, and I like what I see from him. He looks like a nice solid hockey player that can kind of play all aspects. Do you know what I mean? Like, he's a good puck handler, and I think he's a very powerful skater. Not the most agile guy, but he holds onto the puck very well, and I think that helps on both ends of the ice.
So it's early right now, and before you move on to another positive, where would you slot him in next year?
He's definitely in the bottom 6. I think I'd rather have him on the wing, on the third line, and another veteran playing on the fourth line center.
Okay, carry on.
Yes. The next positive would be the AHL depth at the end of the season. We've seen, I think, how many rookies at the end of the season there? I want to say 12, but that seems like a lot. 6 maybe. With your Safin, your Vessel, your Benson. We're gonna have Yamamoto next year. You have your Jones, your Bear. There's a plethora of young players coming into the system, and I think that the performances at the end of the season for Bakersfield were very promising. I like what they got in Marody in the Maroon trade, and I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit more coverage out of the AHL next year. And my final positive would be RNH as a winger for Connor McDavid. I think that he's going to complement Connor's speed and intelligence on the ice, as well as offer a cover for him defensively when he really gets going. So maybe a fourth, Tyretti. So
You
I'll
couldn't
cut it out.
resist, right? You had
I'll
to go
stop
over
at
the
4.
three.
I'll stop at 4.
Stop. All right. Sean, your thoughts on some of the positives from the
That
year?
was a bonus positive from Kelly.
Yeah, bonus
Bonus
positive.
positive. Okay, well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say the emergence of Darnell Nurse. What he did this year, taking his game up a few levels. I think certainly didn't surprise myself and many others. It has been, as an Oilers fan, I must say, it has been frustrating when you listen to a certain faction on Twitter who have been knocking Nurse. I remember reading a tweet earlier in the year, somebody who will go unmentioned, who has their own radio show, had said that he had talked to many people in the know who said that Nurse may never get there as far as the mental side of the game and developing. And that just absolutely drove me nuts. And I'm glad that Nurse really kind of took it to the next level. Because, I mean, for myself and others, we've been watching Nurse. We've had the luxury since he was 16, watch him in the OHL, and the guy was an absolute monster. And just, I mean, you could see the skill set was there. You could see the decision making was there in junior. Just a phenomenal talent. And you knew if you watched him as a junior, you knew it was only a matter of time. Once he put it all together, he was going to be a fantastic player. So it was nice to see that he finally, the game slowed down for him and he really took that next step. So that's a huge positive. The second positive I'll say is moving forward to next year, the stability at center. Chiarelli talked a lot about how much he values the center position, and I think moving forward into next year, we've got McDavid number one center, and you've got Draisaitl on the second line, you've got Strome third line, and then I've got Kara penciled in for the fourth line center. I know Kelly mentioned on the third line, but ideally you'd like to have Lucic, I guess, on the third line. And then get another replacement on the second line or whatever. But if you go into next year with those are your four centers, and then you've got Hopkins, hopefully on the top line as a backup. If somebody does go down, then he can kind of slide down or whatever. I think you're strong. There's a lot of depth there, and I think that's a real positive. And obviously, the test now is just to get the complementary wingers to go with them. But if you're strong down the middle, then you got a real chance. So that's a huge positive for me. And then the last thing Kelly kind of touched on, just the progress of several CHLers in the organization. In particular, this year, Tyler Benson had a huge year out of the WHL, as did Yamamoto. Stuart Skinner still killing it in the playoffs in the WHL as well. So that's a big positive. And then you've got Maximoff and Samorukov had a really good year in the OHL, and then Safin in the Q. There's 6 legit prospects that are coming in the pipeline that really should get you excited. We've got the talent obviously in the big club, and Chiarelli's doing his best to kind of fill in the gaps in the AHL. But we got guys coming as 18 and 19-year-olds as well. So that's a lot to be excited about. And I know there's a lot of people that say they don't see it, and they don't see the Oilers turning this around anytime soon. But for me, I think it's plain as day. We've got talent at all levels now, and it's just a matter of time. We just got to fill in these gaps, and we'll be a team to be reckoned with for sure.
So just before we go on, I'm going to play a little dramatic piano as I watch San Jose celebrate their sweep over Kessler and the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. Not Mighty Ducks anymore, but the Anaheim Ducks. I feel a little bit of sadness right now. Not at all. That's great, and I think worthy of a break, just a momentary break. Hate those guys.
Me too.
Okay. Anyway, sorry. That's my little mid podcast rant. So there, I agree. Let's go back to the Oilers and some of the positives. We got some great, the end of the season in Bakersfield. That was awesome. I saw somebody post, might have been on Oilers Nation, a couple clips on Cooper Marody. This guy looks good, like legit good. I mean, no, it wasn't Oilers Nation. Staples did a little article on him. Yeah, and he looks good. Like really sees the play well. I've seen some other clips, and of course, when we made the trade, looked him up, and all things point to this guy being a player. I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, we thought the same of other players. I think Calgary thought the same of Spencer Fu, who we did too. Obviously, we wanted to sign him, and he might still turn into a player. I don't want to, call that off, but he looks good. Did you guys see either of you? Have you seen any clips or watched anything or read anything? I mean, I really like this guy.
Ellie, have you?
Oh goodness, no, I haven't really kept up on him in terms of the video. But he's older, right? Is he not?
Well, he's NCAA, right? So yeah, he's
got one more year of eligibility, right? So he's got to be 22 or 23. Yes,
I think he's 21. Yeah,
really? Oh wow, then I'm in that case. Then if he's really like performing, apart from the points that he's put up, if he's dominating the play at 21 in the AHL, then that's an outstanding
he is
sign for the Oilers. Yeah. And okay, great. So then that's great. I would like to see him do it for a season, and I wonder if he'll be a top option for them next year in the AHL, mind you.
Well, and we're talking about the positives, right? Yeah, sorry to cut you off. We're talking about positives, but one of the things I would love to see next year is hopefully the players that we've talked about tonight that were sort of negatives in the previous season. I hope they were off years. I think Talbot can bounce back. I think Clefbaum can bounce back. Hopefully, whatever injuries ailed these guys, are gone next year. And I really hope that a guy like Cooper get a chance to spend a year in the AHL and develop some confidence and in the pro game, and we don't rush them. Right. I don't know. My biggest concern for next year, I mean, we're talking about this positive about all these prospects. I'm on board. But my biggest concern is rushing these players now. I think that we've got, Chiarelli's got a really good prospect base happening. And my big concern is just being too bullish on getting them into the Oilers lineup.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. I think Chiarelli kind of learned his lesson this year, right? Because they had Yamamoto there. They've kind of forced Puljujarvi. He relied a lot on the young players in Kajula, Slepyshev, Puljujarvi, and that. So I think he's kind of learned his lesson. Hopefully he's going to try and insulate them a little bit more with some veteran players. As far as Marody goes, I just took a quick peek here at a few clips. It's a very, very short sample, but I pulled a few people there earlier just to kind of get their opinions, and everybody seems to like his game. He has a chance, right? And you look at everybody's complaining about the Patrick Maroon trade. They only got Dudek and a third. Well, the third turned into Marody, so you could pretty much say it's Marody and Dudek, or may not be a prospect. Marody for Maroon basically is the deal. So, I mean, if it works out, great. But I'm with you. I don't think any of these guys, any of these college free agents, should be pushed any further up the lineup. Just let them. And they've done a good job of that too. Like Nick Ellis is still down there. He was a college free agent. Patrick Russell was a college free agent signing. He's still down there. I know Kajula, obviously he's with the main club, but in Benning. But I think they've done a good job of trying to complement both rosters, NHL and AHL. And I think like you said, it'd be good if he gets at least a full year, maybe two, before he gets called up.
Yeah, I think that'd be That would be great. Your thoughts, Sean? Kelly mentioned Ty Ratty. We haven't really had a great sample size of him. I mean, it was really tail end of the year. I think the positive in my mind is just that we re-signed him. Not necessarily. I'd like to see him for hopefully through camp, and then if he starts the season next year, then I'll believe he's for real. But at $800K, if he's real or not, I think they did the right thing. I think that's the positive is the signing in my mind. Any other things, guys, that, if we're looking, as we look into the new year, some of the things, obviously, actually, we mentioned it in the recording that we never took, but Nurse, right? Nurse was obviously a big positive in the year, just his growth. So let's go back to this. You said a radio broadcaster that will remain nameless. What did he say about Nurse? So, or was it him, or was it
No? It was him in particular. I can't remember if it was if he said on his radio show or if he tweeted. Well, he tweeted it out for sure, but he said, "Be very careful or cautious about Nurse. Many people in the know have told me or advised me that this is just an aberration." Like, because it was at the beginning of the season when he started the first 6-7 games or whatever, and I had actually written an article about the emergence of Darnell Nurse. I said, he's coming. I told you he's coming, and watch out, he's going to be awesome. And then this gentleman said a lot of people in the know have told him that Nurse doesn't necessarily have it. This is an aberration, and don't get too excited because he may never get there, kind of thing, right? And boy, did that really tick me off. And I had responded at that point and whatever. I'll retweet it. I'll find it, dig it up, and retweet it and show you. But I just I don't know what it was. His decision making, I guess, was the main thing that people were concerned about the last couple of years. But the kid's a 19, 20-year-old defenseman. Of course, he's going to make mistakes. Look at Matt Benning this year. The same idea. A lot of smart people, and now I'm using his term, but most people around the game, they know that you don't really make a final decision on defenseman until at least 250 to 300 games in a guy's career. If a guy's played 100 NHL games and you're already writing him off and saying he's never going to get there, like, that's pretty ridiculous, especially if you followed him from a 16-year-old all the way through to where he is now, and you've seen that progression. You've seen him in Team Canada. You've seen him, wherever. To write a guy off like that and say, well, he doesn't, I don't think he has it. And a lot of people in the know, quote unquote, tell me. And basically what he's saying is analytic people are saying, based on his stats, his fancy stats, he's not going to be a good player. And that really pissed me off.
Oh, yeah.
You just look at his skill set. He's unbelievable. The game's just got to slow down for him. It's as simple as that. He's a young kid. And that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly why he emerged. And he's going to continue to do that. So, but yeah, I'll dig that up for you, and I'll send it to you so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. What do you guys think? Maybe I'll ask Kelly and get your opinion next, Sean. But one of the positives I took from the year, which might be unpopular as well, is Ryan Strome. I know we traded Eberle, who, like the trade or not. If you don't like the trade, actually, I'll come out and say it. I just think you don't understand the trade, and because it wasn't player for player, and so we got Strome back in that deal. I thought that his play, it took him a while to find his game, but near the end of the season, and you can maybe chalk it up to coaching or usage or whatever you want, I thought that he found his game. I thought he was a capable third-line center, and it's his play that gave us the ability to throw Nuge up on the wing, I think. And, Kelly, you mentioned the Lucic, Strome, Puljujarvi line was, quite good together. I mean, he's a streaky player all the time, but I think, more often than not, he was, very capable third line center. Thoughts, Kelly?
Yeah, I agree with you that people took that trade on face value, right? As player to player, skill for skill, and 20 goal Eberle for whatever 12 goal Strom, and it was never going to be that. It was a salary savings trade basically, and it filled a hole on the roster. Now, if it depends, what hole that they were looking at when they made that trade too. They didn't give him much time up in the top six. They gave him a little bit, but they didn't give him very much, and it took a little bit of time for him to settle in with the team and the style of play. But once everyone decided what his role was going to be, and they grasped that 100%, is when we started to see like what kind of player he really is. And I think he's a perfect player for the third line center. I think he'll be very good for the penalty kill, because he's a skilled hockey player, but he's not so skilled that he doesn't like going into the corners, and he doesn't like roughing it up and cross checking and getting mucky in there and stuff like that. He's he brings a little bit of that blue collar with the skill, and you see it sometimes when he gets the puck into the other zone. He winds it up and he goes around the back of the net and he goes across the blue line. He loves to hold on to it. He's right-handed, which is perfect. The Oilers need a few more righties. But I think that he's still young. I think there's still possibility he could get upwards of 40 points or more, depending on the year and his line mates. I like that Puljujarvi feels comfortable with him, and Puljujarvi is confident playing with Strome. I feel that Puljujarvi is a little bit intimidated by Draisaitl and McDavid. So having Pulju on a line with Lucic and Strome, I think, is going to benefit him a lot.
Sean, your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on Strome?
Yeah. Like I take him as a positive this year, and I think that'd be an unpopular opinion, but in my mind, he was, for what our expectation was on him. I thought it was a positive. He was a positive for the team this year.
Yeah, I think he slowly grew on everyone. He's not amazing by any means, but I think he's solid. As like Kelly said, as a third line center, I think it's a perfect role for him. I mean, Todd McLellan came out and admitted he didn't know what he was and where he fit in the lineup, and it took a while, but eventually they figured it out, and he has got 50 points in the past before. I think he got robbed of a few points this year, and I think realistically, if you keep him at center and give him solid line mates, if he had Lucic and Puljujarvi, it's possible he could get 50 to or 40 to 50 points. So, yeah, I'm happy with him for sure. I think he's a nice addition.
Yeah, he's certainly. I think at one point he had the very similar percentage or point percentage that Eberle had. If you were suggesting at any point that it was a like for like trade, which we all know, any sane person knows it was not. Let's take a break here, and when we come back, we'll last time in the we keep referring to the recording that never happened. We talked about 3 priorities or 3 wishes. I think this time we'll just come back and maybe just have some open Oilers discussion. Talk about maybe a little bit more about coaching. There's some unanswered questions yet that Chiarelli and Nicholson didn't answer in their pressers. When we get back, let's chat about those. Take a break.
Oilers Live Podcast.
Welcome back to Oilers Live podcast. This is the third part of tonight's episode 23. We've got Sean from the Oil Knights, Kelly from Beer League Heroes. Thanks again, guys, for joining. We are just going to open it up, chat a little Oilers hockey, playoffs, whatever, just have some hockey talk. And, lots of different things to talk about. First and foremost, what I do want to start with is let's chat about Chiarelli and Nicholson's pressers. Talk about what they said, what they didn't say. I think what I'm really getting at is what do you think is going to happen with the coaching staff? Of course, last time we went to go record this episode, Gulletson and company still had a job. They are no longer part of the Flames organization. Does that mean anything for the Oilers? Maybe it means nothing at all. We'll get your thoughts. So first off, Sean, what do you think of the press conferences? What's your expectations? Just open it up. What do you got to say?
Okay. Well, I think people are freaking out over nothing with Chiarelli. They're waiting for him to say a whole bunch of, give him all kinds of nitty gritty details or, take a jump on a grenade. But I mean, it's, I don't know. I think is he a lawyer? Chiarelli a lawyer?
Trained lawyer, went to Harvard.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, he basically spoke legalese, right? He's like, well, could I have done this better? Maybe, perhaps, whatever, right? The reality is the coaching staff dropped the ball huge. I mean, you've got a 31st ranked power play with Connor McDavid. I keep going back to that. How is that even possible? Worst penalty kill in the history of the league. Okay. Yeah, so I took from that he was Chiarelli clearly wasn't happy, and he wouldn't totally commit to the coaching staff. And then when Nicholson came on, he just kind of reaffirmed that. I think that it's pretty clear, and if you kind of combine that with the rumors in January, when Daryl Cates wanted to get rid of or fire McLellan at that point, if the rumors are true, I think it all adds up to McLellan and his staff are gone for sure. And now with the firing of all the coaching staff in Calgary, who you could argue the Oilers had higher expectations. They were supposed to be a better team than Calgary, and they fired all their coaches. I think it should be a no-brainer, although you got to look at the options of who else is available to replace them. But ultimately, if I were a betting man, I would say they're all gone. The coaching staff does need to be replaced, and Chiarelli's going to be on notice. He's got 1 year left. And, we'll kind of go from there. So that's kind of what I took from it.
Yeah. Kelly?
Yeah, there's not too much to add to what Sean said. Like, he kind of covered it all. I watched both of the pressers. They're on pretty late here. And he didn't really say anything that we didn't already know, right? And like the fan base that are anti-Chiarelli they want him to come out and say, I'm so sorry the season went the way it was. And, he wanted to take all the responsibility for the entire year when that wasn't exactly the case was. And they didn't like how he took responsibility for the Sekera, trying to find a replacement for Sekera, or, like this, so like if a lot of people want the GM to behave like I guess like a local or something like that. Like, and the Oilers had McTavish and they had Tambellini and they had Lowe for all those years, and they had guys that were, that were kind of local, and they knew the environment. But Chiarelli's not. He's kind of Ivy League. He speaks a completely different way. He behaves a different way. And I think the fan base is irritated by that. But as for Nicholson, like, I had no idea he was holding a presser until that day, right? And he just came in and said, Chiarelli's the man, so suck it. Sorry, you're stuck with him until next season. And then the next day we started getting like, oh, it's the old boys club versus Nicholson and Chiarelli, and they want McClellan to stay. You know, this group wants McClellan to go, and it's turned into a complete shit show. And I'm not sure if it's a distraction for something else that's going to happen. But it's not a good look for the organization on a whole, right? So that's my thoughts of the other pressers.
Yeah, my thought on it is, and you guys touched on it, but there is nothing that Chiarelli could have said or done in that press conference that wouldn't have had the same fan result on Twitter or on the blogs or otherwise. Everybody already had their mind made up. In fact, they were probably just sitting on their Twitter accounts with negative tweets already drafted and just waiting to hit send. And the only thing that Nicholson could have done that would have made any sort of positive remarks was let go of Chiarelli. And when he kept Chiarelli on, it was the same guys, same group of people that have been negative against Chiarelli all year. Were saying the same thing. If you didn't believe in the team that he put together, then you weren't going to get anything out of the press conferences. Either guy did. Now, what did surprise me was, I think that, at the start of the year, people were maybe more on McClellan's side, thinking that it was the team that, and I shouldn't actually, let me take a step back, because I keep going back to the fact that at the start of the year, everybody was saying the Oilers were going to make it to the finals. And then, 20 games in, when the Oilers weren't doing well, the team that Chiarelli put together was awful. Nothing changed in 20 games other than, how it was coached. And so that was the team that everybody, all the pundits, all the experts were saying was going to the finals. 20 games in, it became apparent that it was going to be a tough year or a different year. And then all of a sudden, Chiarelli's to blame. Hindsight's 2020. If he was really to blame, people would have been yelling that at the start of the season. Sure, there were there was negative commentary about the Lucic and the Russell contracts, but nobody was saying this team wasn't going to the finals. So some underperforming. I guess my biggest thought on it is, there was, the press conferences seemed a little bit early in my mind, because they didn't, to your point, Kelly, they didn't say anything. They didn't say anything we didn't already know. Although Nicholson did, he gave the only real thing that they said was, "Hey, Chiarelli's on for another season."
Yeah.
So Sean, you said you seem to think McClellan is gone. Is that kind of your bet? Is that we're going to see him shown the door?
I think so. And I think, and the reason why I think that, again, I go back to when they were talking about Cates. First of all, was wanted to fire him back then, but ultimately, like just think about it for a second. Put your GM hat on for a second. So you have 1 year left, basically. If you don't make the playoffs as GM, you're Peter Chiarelli. You don't make the playoffs. Next year, you're fired. So what are you willing to do? Your team underachieved last year. So what are you willing to do? Are you cool with bringing a coach back who just led a team that everybody thought was a Stanley Cup contender, or at least a playoff team? He underachieved and led that team to a disastrous finish and couldn't coach a power play or penalty kill to save his life. Are you willing to bet your future, your employment, on that guy rebounding enough to salvage your job? Or are you willing to take a chance on a more proven guy, I don't know, like Alain Vigneault or whoever, right? Although I guess he's never won a cup, has he? But whatever. He's somebody like him or whatever. If you're the GM, like you got to weigh those options, right? Like I don't see how McClellan. I don't see how anybody in within reasonable train of thought, how you can justify McClellan coming back based on last year's performance. If you want to say, oh, well, we should never fire him because of history, we fired so many other coaches. Well, that doesn't really support McClellan's actual coaching performance. You just look at last year as a whole, it was god awful. It was god awful. Bottom line. So is Chiarelli, why would he sacrifice his job on that rebounding? Like it doesn't make sense. And then, if you look at, some of the old videos, Don Cherry and that talking about how, Todd McClellan lost, he was pointing the finger at McDavid 4 games into the season. He benched Talbot 2 or 3 games into the season, and the coach will never get those players back kind of thing. You got to kind of add it all up, and there's no way you should bring this guy back. I think it's a worse decision to bring him back than to not bring him back. Give the players a breath of fresh air, kind of reset, forget last year, just wipe your hands clean, start over, get a guy in there that can, work with the younger players and hopefully make a difference next year. So yeah, sorry for the long spiel, but I think it's a no-brainer. Todd McClellan and the staff will be fired.
Yeah, your thoughts, Kelly? I mean, you think he's gone? As every day goes on, I get less and less sure about it. But Kelly, you think?
Yeah, I feel the same. I feel the same way as you, Mike.
Yeah, and the only reason is, there's so many rumors go around, obviously, especially this time of year, and especially with something that is so unsure. But we've heard the Cates thing about McClellan, but we've also heard the live and die by the sword aspect with McClellan, or having somebody be the scapegoat. Obviously one of the assistants. Truly, I want to see McClellan gone. If I'm to say what my opinion is, as you said, put the GM hat on. I don't think there's any. He just didn't. It seems to me there was a disconnect all season long. And Sean, I want to agree with you. I keep getting this sort of foreboding feeling that what I've heard about the assistants going and him staying is going to be a very distinct possibility.
And you could be right, and a lot of it does come down to the options too, right? Like I think we can all agree if Joel Quenneville was fired by Chicago, that would be a guy that Chiarelli would be after, and I'm sure other teams would be too. That he would seriously, it would be a no-brainer. Like McClellan would be gone and Quenneville would be there if he could. But if there's not a lot of other realistic options, then I can understand why they would keep McClellan and get rid of the assistants and hope it works out. But this argument of, well, if it doesn't work out, well, then 20 games into the season, we can just let him go and get somebody else. Well, who's going to be available halfway or 20 games?
Bill Peters. Bill Peters.
Yeah, we'll see. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
So let's chat about that, because you guys know I want to talk about it. I think Bill Peters. Sean, put it out there the other day. It didn't seem like anybody was even thinking about it. Maybe I'm the only guy that's put this in my thought process. He's got, if you take the very first year that he went into Carolina, you take that away, that was the only losing season he had. Well, that's not true. He was 1 game under, I think, this year. But he's actually put together a pretty good record. And then you also look at the penalties against that team. They have finished the least amount of penalties every single season except one since he's been there. And then that season they finished 29th. So very disciplined. I know, Kelly, I think you remarked, or somebody remarked, that you got to look at the lineup, but that's still quite the discipline no matter what. I mean, we're talking hockey players, NHL hockey players that have a propensity for being competitive and, as a hockey, and you guys know you've played hockey. You put the skates on and you want to go out there and you want to, play as hard as you can, and you'll get some penalties. These guys were disciplined. I don't think he's had any superstars in Carolina. Feel free to tell me I'm wrong. But I think Bill Peters would be a capable replacement for McLellan. And the more I look at it, the more I like it. I think we'll get a good feel for how he looks. Of course, he's got until Friday to exercise his option.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Either of you take the ball.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say it's interesting because he's going to be coaching McDavid and Hopkins, and I love how he came out and said Hopkins is going to play on the same line as McDavid. I don't know if he's trying to butter up Chiarelli or what's going on there, but in Carolina too, I guess keep in mind they never really had any real good goaltending too. Like Cam Ward is typically, I don't think of Cam Ward as even
he had one good season. That's honestly,
yeah, exactly, right. And how long has that been? And Scott Darling was awful this year, so he hasn't really had the goaltending, and they haven't really had any real studs up front either. Although Aho had a good year, I guess this year. They've got a good defense in that, but yeah, I think if you just look at stylistically, does it match up? Possibly. I know he likes quick transitional defense, and I know he's kind of a fancy stat, fancy stat people seem to like him because he's big on possession and that. It's possible. I don't really know enough about him to say either way. I know he's got a good history in the past, a good record in the past. But like you said, well, I guess we'll get the answer to that real quick by Friday if he decides to opt out or not.
Yeah, he has been brought up with Calgary, by the way. He was brought up on TSN and Sportsnet as a possibility for the Calgary organization. He's an Alberta boy, right? I believe from Three Hills. So, from a family perspective, I think he does have some history with both Chiarelli and with Tree Living, so it could be one of the other. The interesting thing that I was listening to Fan 960, the Calgary radio station. They brought up that they were talking about possible Flames replacements. I can't remember who it was, and then they said, or it could be somebody that's already coaching right now. Which, seemed to me to potentially suggest that it was maybe Bill Peters, somebody they could actually talk about it. And they might have been referring to just waiting to see what the market brings. But yeah, Sutter obviously has been brought up numerous times in the future Houston franchise there. So Kelly, any thoughts on Bill Peters?
I don't know if I'm as convinced as you guys.
Well, Sean's not convinced. No. It's me.
Peter.
Yeah.
No.
He doesn't impress me so much. I think there's a more likelihood he goes to Calgary than to Edmonton because it looks like Calgary's trying to move things around, the week that he has this availability. And so I would only assume they're trying to wine and dine him right now and see if he's going to come on over. I think Stauffer had Jermaine Franklin on his show. It was today or yesterday, and he was saying that his top three were Barry Trotz, Bill Peters, and Dave Tippett. Those were the Flames' top three in his opinion for coaching next year. So, and Bob Stauffer has talked about this week alone. He's talked about Bruce Boudreau. And today he was talking about Barry Trotz. So I think there's a feeling league-wide that Boudreau and Trotz are going to get fired at the end of the season. And maybe those are the coaches that they're talking about when they say, they're waiting because there's a coach still coaching in the league, right?
Yeah, I think if Trotz doesn't make it at least to the conference finals.
No, I've heard there's like
a
a disconnect anyhow. I think that he might go at the end of the year unless they win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's I don't know how you can I don't know how you can have like that much of a disconnect with Barry Trotz given his record, but Washington lost a lot off their back end this last year in the summer, right? So, and Holtby isn't what he was either. Now, are you going to blame that on Barry Trotz? I'm not sure. For me, like I said, I'm still torn on whether McLellan's going to go or not. I still think that they're concerned about paying him out $10 million not to coach for the next 2 years, and they'd rather keep him on and then make him work with a couple of assistants that can take over when they do decide to fire him. I don't like. There's so many different stories going on that it's hard to get a read on what's actually happening. Like the rumor of Jay Woodcroft going to coach in Bakersfield so they can have some continuity in the coaching styles is one that's come up in the last 7 days. And
I think I heard that from you first. So what do you think?
Stauffer talked about it too.
Oh, did Stauffer talk about that? What do you think after that? I mean, because Woodcroft is responsible for the power play.
Yeah. Which is a shit power play.
Yeah, even if it finished 15th in the league, it would be shit. And you know why? Because we've got Connor McDavid and Draisaitl on our power play. That should be easily top 5 power play. And we, anything less than top 5 in the league, in my mind, with that type of talent, is awful.
Well, that's the other thing too, right? Because McLellan and Woodcroft have a history of good special teams, right? It's so that's why this year is a really hard year to get a read on everything. But yeah, so for the coach going into next season, like I said, they could toss Dave Tippett and I don't know some ex-Oiler behind the bench with him, because that's what they do, right? Where the Oilers never really, they have a hard time. Excuse me. They have a hard time outright firing people. They find new positions for them, so they don't have to pay them out, right? So, I was talking to the dirtbag last night, and we were trying to figure out which kind of coaches would be suitable for this, for this management group, and it came down to ex-Oilers and guys from the West. And so I got looking about in the junior teams and stuff like that, and I didn't know this, but Jason Smith actually coached the Kelowna Rockets this year, and he coached them to a very good record in the WHL. And to me, I'm thinking, that's a not bad guy to add to the coaching staff. I guess it goes along the lines of he's an ex-Oiler and he's from the West. And the other guy, the coach for Sault Ste. Marie, is Drew Bannister, and he played a little bit for the Oilers back in the day. So toss those two guys into the Logosphere rumor mill.
Yeah, obviously there's going to be quite a few. I've heard Dave Tippett coming in as assistant coach.
That was my idea. Put him in there because
I think I've heard that elsewhere now. Maybe it's starting to
pick up some steam, right?
Yeah.
Toss him in there. They fire McLellan. They got a ready-made coach right there, ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, Doug Wade apparently is going to. Is Doug Wade and Garth Snow both staying in the Islanders?
Well, somebody said that the owner, when the owner did his year-end presser there, the owner or president, I'm not. Forgive me, I'm not sure which position he holds, but somebody leaked out that they're going to keep them on for another year, and he said that the feeling was that he wasn't prepared to say that. So there's the Islanders, the disconnect in Long Island, right? So, I do have a question, to the fan base, is that are guys like Wade, and are they part of the old boys club? Like, does the fan base get angry if the Oilers hired Doug Wade as head coach?
I think Doug Wade would qualify.
Yeah. He played a long time in Edmonton.
Yeah.
Right? So are they angry if they hire Bill Guerin as GM?
I don't know.
Well, yeah, that's a good question.
You know what I mean? So he's got the ex-Oilers that are really good at their jobs, but because they're ex-Oilers, they're going to get
I think
shit
Bill
on.
Guerin's actually he's got a good. He's earning a lot of respect. I think he's kind of building a good reputation for himself.
Yeah.
And I don't think he was with you. He wasn't with you that
He's
long.
a hard
Was he?
worker,
What,
right?
3 years?
He only a few
How long
years.
was he with you?
Yeah.
3.5
He
years.
was traded for Jason Arnott, wasn't he?
Yeah.
No, he runs Pittsburgh's. He's an AGM in Pittsburgh, right? And he runs their minor
Well,
system.
I just wanted to mention before I forget, Dallas Eakins is in the running for the Peterborough Pete's job in the OHL. I don't know if he's going to get it, but apparently that's a big rumor. So I'm kind of rooting for him getting the job. That way I can see him live and I can chirp him in person. It'd be pretty funny.
So you're not a big Eagles fan then?
Well, whatever.
That's shocking because he's part of the Peterborough Mafia, right?
Yeah.
So, you know,
The Roger Nielsen School of Coaching.
Yeah.
I sure hope, that, if McClellan goes, though, I mean, the reason why I think I'm so big on Bill Peters is I don't necessarily want a guy like Trotz, like a really sort of institutionalized coach, right? It'd be like Lindy Ruff, Trotz, those guys, if Hitchcock didn't retire this year, these are guys, McClellan's in that boat, right? Like institutionalized NHL coaches, guys that, haven't taken any time off. And, year after year, they've got their, like, Tortorella took a little bit of time, comes back. He's a new coach. I would argue, one of the best coaches in the league right now, whether you agree or not.
I love Tort.
Yeah. But prior to leaving and taking some time off, I think he needed to. Right? Like, I think these guys need a reset. So, it's possible, Tippett would qualify, right? Except for the fact that, I just don't think he's got enough behind him. He hasn't done anything that, would be noteworthy. And this is why I'm kind of, as I look at Bill Peters, I'm get a little bit more excited about it, because here's a guy that, he built his way up to the NHL, right? He took, Spokane to a Memorial Cup. He goes to Rockford, the Ice Dogs, and gets them to the Calder Cup playoffs. Every year he's there with a winning record. Then he goes, was it Ottawa? He was assistant coach. He did a year.
Detroit, I thought.
I'll have to look it up, but he did a year
Peters
as assistant.
was in Detroit. He was Babcock. Yeah.
Oh, that's right, Detroit. Sorry. Even better, right? Like, that's a good organization 5 years ago to learn from. He steps into Carolina, which is the perennial, 9th or 10th place team, right? So it is, the worst place to finish in the NHL is probably 9th or 10th in your conference, right? Especially in the old drafting rules. And so, he's got no really high-end prospects coming in. He's got, you're right, some good defense. But Sebastian Aho, right? Is this the guy you're relying on to take you to the playoffs? Because if he is, then your team's in trouble. And yet, he was there except for the first year, he's had meaningful games late into the season. Now, Carolina kind of fell apart at the end of the year, but I think, 4 years with a franchise can make the players maybe listen a little less. Like, I think a coach has about a 4-year, 5-year, unless if you are doing super well. I think a coach, people listen to him for 4 or 5 years. and then they start to tune out a little bit. So I'm really impressed with his record. I think I think we'll see what's going to happen in the World Hockey Championships. But he was on Stauffer. They had Bill Peters on Stauffer last Friday. And, he had Nurse on right after him or something. And he said, he said something, I'm excited to coach Nurse. And then, of course, to your point, Kelly, he did say, I'm going to put RNH on, or maybe you said that, Sean, RNH on McDavid's wing. He's Alberta boy. If he doesn't go to Calgary, I just think, I think we might see McClellan let go pretty quick, and Bill Peters announced as the new head coach. I'd go so far as to run over to Vegas and put a couple dollars down.
That's
on
funny.
it.
Well, yeah. Well, sorry, I was just going to say. I know doesn't he? I think he kind of rubs guys the wrong way a little bit. Like I remember hearing something early in the year. Like he's not afraid to call players out. I think he had issues with Victor Rask. I think maybe it was him or something. He just. He's a pretty outspoken guy. I know he's big on possession. That's his main thing, possession analytics. I'm not sure if that's necessarily what Chiarelli's going to be looking for in terms of like a style of a coach in that. But you're right. I mean, he does have a good resume and there is a lot to like about him. But again, I guess as we're recording, it's Thursday now. He's got 1 day to opt out, unless he gets fired, of course. But so this may all be all for naught. But yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting discussion.
So I just I did a quick Google search for Bill Peters and Rask, and there's no shortage of Bill Peters throws team under the bus.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah.
It was. It looks like early February. There's about 10 articles.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
He did the same thing to Eddie Lack too.
Did he? Okay.
Well, Eddie Lack.
Yeah, I think it was even before Eddie Lack. Yeah, of course. But like, still, they not trade for Eddie Lack to be their number one, and then he couldn't hold the post. So at the end of that, I think it was the end of maybe last year, he threw him under the bus, and so when he did it to Rask again, that had people, ears were perked, similar to what Gulletson did this year when he, lost it on the Flames a couple times quite publicly.
To me, that's the funniest part of that whole season.
The stick throwing.
I don't know what it is about that incident, but I just get a kick out of it because how bad are we looking for NHL news that a guy throwing his stick over the boards in a practice is newsworthy?
Flames were sucking at that time, so they're looking for anything.
Yeah, if you've ever had a practice playing hockey growing up, your coach yelled at you at least once, right? Like, how is that news? Anyway, that's why I find that so amusing.
Yeah.
If a coach doesn't yell at you at least once, then I don't know if who's the right guy.
Yeah, exactly. So what else around the team this year? I mean, or you guys want to talk a little playoff hockey? I'm wearing my. By the way, if you go on to beerleagueheroes.com, Kelly's got some great T-shirts. I've got one. It's a Fuck Kessler shirt. And it's great. I'm wearing it with pride tonight as the Anaheim Ducks are officially out. I noticed on Twitter, NHL put out a little they put out those stupid stats all the time. This will be the first time or something that two teams will have swept their first round matches to meet in the second round. So we've got the Golden Knights in San Jose going into the second round. Who's going to win that series? What are your thoughts?
Don't ask me. I'm horrible at predicting teams.
Who do you want to win?
I think Vegas.
Who do you want to win?
I don't know about you guys, but I am They started off as a nice story, but I am so sick to death of the Las Vegas or Vegas Golden Knights, whatever the hell their name is.
Yeah.
Get rid of them. Oh, they drive me nuts now, and their Twitter account drives me nuts, and the team are just, yeah, I don't know what it is. It's just not fair. I don't know if it's like the stars are aligning for them. Everything is working out in their favor. Now they're just annoying. I want them to go away. So I hope they get swept.
Swept. Wow.
Go Sharks.
Your thoughts, Kelly? Who do you want to win that series? That's the only series we know. We know a second round series. Hard to believe at this point.
I would like to pick the Golden Knights on this one.
Yeah.
I don't like the Sharks at all, and I like Marc-Andre Fleury, so I don't want the Sharks anything to do with them in the conference finals.
So I'm going to be selfish. I had the Sharks in my bracket, so I'm going to go with the Sharks.
Yeah, I picked the Ducks. Man, that sucks.
Clearly, I'm a smarter hockey guy than you.
I picked LA to go to the Cup, so there's
Oh, did you? Yeah.
That's it. You're out.
Yeah.
No more from you.
I tell people now, I say, you know what, from now on, anybody that follows me, I'd like to think I'm pretty good as comes to player personnel and, projecting players and draft picks and whatever. Comes to teams, predicting, forget it. Just take the opposite.
So for the listeners out there, now you know why it's my podcast.
Yeah.
Of course, I did. I've picked Washington to go to the conference finals in the East. That's have you guys watched any of that series? I mean, 3 games into overtime. I love a series like that. I just think it's. I think Washington's been the. They've just had some bad bounces. Fancy stats guys will hate that, but they've been bad bounces.
Columbus is better, I think. All like deeper talent wise. I feel. I think their goaltending is on point right now, and but whoever makes it out of this has to play Pittsburgh next, right? And they're just teeing off on the Flyers. So if they can. I think the next series will be a really good one because the between Washington and Columbus and whoever them plays Pittsburgh is usually quite a good game, but they'll be on the momentum of winning such a hard fought series, and Pittsburgh will have confidence will be high from just lighting up the Philly goaltending for 5 games or whatever it's going to be now.
Yeah.
But what about some of the other series? Pittsburgh. So can you believe that Crosby just passed Mario Lemieux as the Pittsburgh all-time playoff point leader?
That's impressive.
I seen that today. Took a minute to register. It took a few more games to get it done, but he's had a few more years in the playoffs too. So.
Crosby though has been this season, the tail end of this season and then into the playoffs, he's been outstanding. I mean, it's just he's on another level. The guy's got a level of skill that is, second to none. Like, he is outstanding. But his playoff performance so far has been unbelievable. What about Toronto, Boston? You think Toronto can win tomorrow night? It's tomorrow night, right? I think.
Yeah, I think so. That's a good series too. I mean, Boston's totally outplayed them, but something about Toronto at home. Those fans get behind them, and boy, do they get motivated. Although, I mean, the last game, I really didn't like the first goal that Toronto scored. They got the penalty where they said it went straight out to delay a game, and it actually went off the boards, and they scored 7 seconds later. But, if Toronto doesn't win this game, they're done. But, Boston has that line of Pasternak, Marchand, Bergeron is just dominated, right? So, it's hard to bet against Boston at this point. But again, if Toronto can steal another game at home tomorrow night, and they say you're never in trouble till you lose at home, then they've got a chance. But I would still go with Boston in that one. But again, I know nothing, so. So take Toronto.
Take Toronto. I've got Boston in my bracket, and that was more of a want than a hockey hockey knowledge discussion. I'd hate to see Toronto win. It's bad enough that they won a game. That Matthews scores a goal and he's back. Like,
was he gone?
Yeah. Yeah, I know, Sean. You don't say names, but I think it's Myrtle.
James Myrtle.
Like, yeah, like that guy. What did he post something on? Who does he write for? It's not. It's the Athletic. Yeah, and you know what? I love the Athletic. I'm a
he started
big subscriber.
He started.
Did he?
Yeah.
Well, unreal. I mean, he posts something about Toronto after they win a game, and he's like, "Now we see who they really are." Like, so if they lose, that's not who they are. I mean, that's just garbage. Yeah,
writing gets clicks.
that's exactly what it is. It just gets clicks, and that guy is like the king of that. I don't. It drives me nuts. And then who's the other guy that he got the wrath of Oilers Twitter because he basically is
Damien Cox
writes in a Flair or something like that. I don't even. You know what? I don't care because he wrote an article being an apologetic article for if the Maple Leafs get swept. Don't worry, folks. We're not the Oilers. We'll be back next year. Did you guys see that one?
Damien Cox.
No.
No, I don't think it was Damien Cox. Oh man, you know what? I'm going to find out who. But yeah, this is kind of our. This is about as real riled up as I get. Talking about Toronto media. Yeah, it's.
I totally tune it out.
It just.
Yeah, it's brutal.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, you're in the heart of it over there, right? Like. You probably hear it most. It's probably easier to tune it out when it's not when it's all the time, right? Because it's just part of the drone that carries on.
Yeah, I kind of block everything out now. That's why I came into the Edmonton market because I was so sick of the Toronto market. It's brutal.
Well, you guys, either of you cheering for Taylor Hall and the Devils?
No.
An emphatic no. What?
Emotional.
Yeah. And are you like? Is it because it's Taylor Hall, or just not cheering for the Devils?
Like for me, like I'm cheering for Toronto because I don't want Boston to win because you're never gonna hear the end of it online if the Chiarelli-less Bruins win, right? Like. And it's the same goes for New Jersey, right? The pro Hall crowd they just won't shut the fuck up about that, right? So they can both lose, and then I don't have to hear it for the rest of the playoffs until next season starts.
Your thought, Sean? I mean, what's anything? Like, do you even care about that series? I'm actually I've got Matthew Estevez. From Raw Charge. I'm going to do a podcast with him tomorrow. He's with Tampa Bay, the Tampa Bay site. Mm-hmm. I actually I like this Tampa Bay team. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see them go, a ways. And it's not that I'm against Taylor Hall, but honestly, I could care less. He's not an Oiler anymore, and so I don't care, right? Like, I'm not cheering against him or not cheering for him. I liked Maroon when he was an Oiler, but he's not an Oiler anymore. So I could give a shit, and
it's funny that people on Twitter are just like, "Oh, don't tell me not to cheer for Taylor Hall or who I should fan for," and whatever. I mean, Taylor Hall, as you know, I've never really liked him. I'm a London guy. He was a Windsor guy. I hated him right from the beginning. He was an Oiler. I was praying we wouldn't draft him. I have my own personal opinions and about him as a person, and whatever. I mean, why am I going to cheer for the Devils? Like, who cares? The one thing I will say with him, and what really drives me nuts, and everybody says, "Oh, could you imagine if we still had Taylor Hall with Connor McDavid?" And why would anybody trade them away? What a stupid GM! But like, I think you need to. It just blows my mind. People don't just understand that. Did you ever think that maybe he's a product? Like the Taylor Hall of today is a product of circumstance, a product of what happened in the past. If he didn't get traded to New Jersey, didn't get kicked in the nuts, and didn't have to have a real kind of heart to heart with his new coach and just kind of reevaluate himself as a person in New Jersey, would he be the player he is today? If he just stayed in Edmonton and just kind of went through the motions and tried to piggyback off McDavid, or it worked or it didn't work, do you think he would be at an MVP caliber level? And I'll admit he's having a fantastic year this year. I mean, there's so many different variables that come into play to say, oh, we should have kept Hall and then we'd have the two best players in the league. Like that's so ridiculous. But I mean, for me personally, I really don't care. I don't like them. I hope they lose. And as far as Tampa goes, I just love what they're doing. And they showed that series has been really chippy, very aggressive tonight. If you watch the game tonight, boy, was it an aggressive game. And I like what Yzerman's doing there, and I like Tampa. So I kind of care.
He's not fully. He's not committed to caring, but he kind of does.
Yeah. Well, keep in mind it's like 2:30 in the morning here, so now it's my caring level is kind of gone down.
That's just right. What time is it there in Taipei?
It's about 2:30 in the afternoon.
So you're 12 hours ahead of London.
Yeah, straight 12.
London.
14 on you, I think.
Yeah. And I'm in, we're 12, 12, and 12. It's just about 12:30 here in, we're 12 hours from Taipei, rather. 10 hours, I guess. 12:30 here in Vancouver right now. So we're coast to coast and around the world tonight. You know what, guys? It is probably getting a little bit late. We've talked some Oilers hockey. We've talked a little bit of playoffs. We've got some things to look forward to. What is it, about 10 days until the draft lottery?
Yep.
I'm going to assume, guys, we're going to get back on and do a prospect episode, right?
That's right.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we win or lose the lottery. If we win the lottery, it'll be a fun episode. If we don't win it, it'll just be about who we might pick.
Yeah.
We got about a 5% chance, is it?
Something like that. Yeah, but keep in mind, Philly were the 12th worst. They had the 12th worst odds last year, and they got the second overall pick. So use that.
Was Dallas worse than Philly?
No, but I think they were. Because they were 6th, right? Or 7th or something. I think. I don't know. I can look it up quick. But.
Yeah, well, the Islanders will get something in there, won't they? Or it'll just be the irony that they don't.
Yeah, maybe not. They don't have that great of odds. I mean, they're better than the Oilers, but I can't remember how much it is. But I don't think it's that much better.
Who's Dallas that? The Islanders?
Yeah.
So they have 11.4% odds of top 3 for their pick, and then for the Calgary pick, 8.2%.
Oh wow,
20%. That's top 3, right? So first overall, they've got 3.5 and 2.5. We've got a 16% chance of top 3. That's a pretty decent chance, right? I mean,
that's good. And I think we can, and we'll talk about this on the next episode. But I mean, if the Oilers don't get a top 3 pick, and Chiarelli kind of alluded to it at the at his presser, that there's a high probability they're going to trade that pick or trade down to kind of fill a hole, right? So, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, we didn't do last time. We did wish list, but we didn't get a chance to do that this time. I changed it up. That's right.
That's why you got the pod.
Right. That's why they made me boss. it's one of the key reasons why I'm doing this. So that once in my life I've got some say in what goes on. Yeah, a little bit of power. It all goes to my head. I walk around town now and I say, "Yeah, you think you know hockey, but you're not podcasting." Yeah.
I've got a podcast.
All right, guys. I think that's pretty good for tonight. We'll maybe end it here. Thanks again for joining me. We'll get you back in 9 days and 17 hours is when the draft happens. Before we go, I want to do a live episode. I do have a method to do it. We need to, in order to do it, we need to find, in my mind, I've got to have at least 10 listeners that listen live for it to be successful. If we do it live, it's also recorded at the same time. So over the next little while, and for those people that have made it to this part of the podcast and are still listening, think about it. I do want to do a live one. People then can interact with us, ask us some questions, etc. They can't call in, which is probably a good thing because I've heard some of the yahoos that call into Stauffer's show or any of the other shows, and I don't know how they deal with them. You got to have an insane amount of patience, but they will be able to comment. So I'd like to do that eventually. And then, as I said, if we had 10 listeners, we're up to, just from a numbers perspective, and if anybody cares, I get roughly on average about 300 listeners an episode, which I think is half decent. I think it's better than the 2 or 3 family members I expected to listen.
Well, I got 9 family members that can call in if you need 10 people. So
there we go. We're good. We're good to go. All right. Any last thoughts, guys, before we wrap it up?
I just want to wish the Anaheim Ducks a fun off-season golfing, and I hope that Kessler gets to cry on his goaltending pad pillow for the rest of the summer. Enjoy it, biatch.
It's funny. And for Todd McClellan, I've got a bunch of reality or realty firms that are following me on Twitter. So if you need me to hook you up, you just send me a quick tweet, and we'll get your house sold real fast, buddy. You too.
All right. Have a great night, guys.
Oilers Live.